So I'm here to talk to you tonight about artists and how they are the new frontier when it comes to people who are really going to tackle the most important issues facing our cities. So for a long time, artists have been vital to a successful city. They're able to bridge divides, they're able to open lines of communication, they're able to identify issues, and then create something that really resonates with the community, that really shares what the community is about. And that's been very effective, but it's also been relegated to its own isolated zone. And it's been very separate from what civic leaders describe as serious problems, things that really take a lot of coordination, a lot of heavy thinking. And I think that that ends up being a very big missed opportunity when it comes to how you could truly unlock innovation in a civic space. And so when you think about the most iconic urban environments, the visual shorthand is usually something that an artist designed. Now, whether that's an installation or an impactful building or a sculpture or a well-designed public space, these are the things that really make a city what it is. And I think that people often think that's where it ends. They think that, you know, when the times get tough and it's time to tighten your belt, art is the first thing to go. There's really no other use for it. There's really only there as ephemera. And I think that that is something that's going to change because cities are now undergoing a revolutionary repopulation. People are reclaiming the urban space. People are having to decide and reimagine what these cities are going to function like and who they're going to function for. And as a result of that, it's going to take a lot of really innovative and creative thinking to approach these 21st century problems. And so my role for a long time, or at least several years, has been to really bridge artists, the public, and the civic leadership. And when I started out, I didn't know anything about artists. I was an MBA who slept through most of my art history classes. Sorry, Mom. And really, it wasn't until I started working with a friend of mine where I really started spending time with creators, and I said, wow, there's just so much potential to be unlocked with these people who are so passion-driven, who are so oriented around problem solving. And really, I was also able to see the disconnect between civic priorities and what artists were capable of doing or what they were given to do. And so I really spent a lot of time putting together projects that really made these potential more accessible to the public, really started to say that all of our priorities are aligned. And so I think that when we go and talk about how these cities are going to innovate for the 21st century, artists are going to be having a very prominent seat at the table. So, and when I say artists, I don't mean just MFAs and photographers and painters. I mean anyone who is really honing a creative skill and using it to enact change. That's a filmmaker, that's a designer, that's someone in tech, that's someone who really sees a problem and uses their very, very specific skill to orient the community around it. So why artists? Well, first of all, they do a lot with very, very little. The cities always point to money as the reason why a really innovative approach is not necessary, where this really, really necessary innovation is not being adopted. And I think that, first of all, artists from the dawn of time have had no money. You know, I mean, none. And so this is a population that is extremely equipped to do so much with very little, sometimes with nothing. And I think that when you have a professional class that is so used to budget constraints, really savvy cities are going to start to tap these resources and say, what are solutions that can be very cost effective and think outside the box? And so one example locally we have is Art Hotel. So like many, many other states, California has had its redevelopment dollars just evaporate overnight. And so cities have been really, really stymied about how do we start targeting investment to the urban core. So here comes a bunch of intrepid artists who kind of cobble together $10,000. This is dozens and dozens of artists. $10,000 and basically pick the sketchiest, most flea-ridden, drugged-in of a hotel and overnight turned into a living, breathing art installation. And it was so incredible because you saw people who had never stepped foot in Sacramento waiting hours just to catch a glimpse of this. They had over 10,000 visitors in 9 days, turned away thousands of other people who were just so excited to see this energy in a place where no one wanted to be. I don't know what would happen if you asked a developer or a city official, I'm going to give you $10,000, and I want you to create something that has people waiting 4 hours to go into a crack house. They'd probably have to give away free crack. But anyways, imagine though it wouldn't have been anything like what actually occurred, and imagine if the city's full set of resources been there to make sure that it was leveraged as much as possible. So artists also are really good at coalition building and really being a bridge between civic leadership and what's going on the ground. Because of who they are, civic leaders are isolated. You know, I'm not sure if you've ever been to a city council meeting, and God bless you if you have. I'm still at PTSD from my last one. But essentially, the people that show up are either very, very pro or very, very negative. And they usually don't represent the full spectrum of what the community cares about or the priorities of the community. And so really, artists are community creatures. There's very few people who can kind of go into every nook and cranny of a neighborhood the way artists can. And I think this is a super valuable resource as a conduit to leadership, to what's happening on the ground, what should we be responding to, what solutions would actually resonate in the community. We saw this recently with the Orlando tragedy. All of us were so shocked and horrified by this, this incredible display of violence and discrimination. And after the rallies were done and the tears were dry, people still felt like there's something that we have to do. There's some kind of call to action the community can have to really set the tone that this is not okay here or anywhere. And leaders didn't really know exactly what to do, but we partnered with artists. We came up with a campaign called Pride Over Prejudice. We actually partnered with the local artist who's here, Jake Castro. We utilized the Hacker Lab to make a bunch of stencils so that people could actually come and participate in this campaign. And what was amazing about it is that people came out in droves and made their own signs to really make a stand and make a bold statement about, we are celebrating the diversity of this neighborhood and this city of this region, and we won't stand for this. And it was very successful, and now you go all over Sacramento and goes to windows of businesses and residents, and you see this. And this is something that could never have occurred had we not immediately sought out an artist to make it a reality. It was really a real-time reaction to something that ordinarily would have taken a lot of committees to figure out what statement to make. Speaking of bold statements, artists take risks. When you are really dependent on votes or your new annual budget or someone giving you campaign funds or the myriad of other political considerations that a leader has to consider, it really stops you from taking risks. It stops you from trying something new, something that might alienate your base, even if it's a really good idea. So in some ways, artists can really be a cover for trying something innovative, where you're like, well, it wasn't my idea, it was these guys' idea. And then you can implement it without maybe the repercussions you would have. It's like consultants that, with better hair, essentially. And so I think that when you look at the function that artists perform, they're the ones who are there to call out hypocrisy or to shake up the status quo or to call out systems and institutions that really aren't working or that are very self-interested. And so one example that is really funny is in Bogota, Colombia. This mayor took over, and this is a place where police were wildly corrupt. You had many kind of traffic-related fatalities, and there was a real crisis in that city. And so what he did is he disbanded the traffic police, and he said, I'll rehire you as a mime. And so literally, they came on board as mimes and dispersed throughout the city, and if you made a traffic violation, you literally got clowned by a clown. It was amazing, and they also kind of did some funny stuff about what it's like to be a pedestrian, but they saw a 50% reduction in traffic-related fatalities over this period. This happened in the 90s, and it persists even to this day. So this is an example of something that is really outside the box that probably a mayor couldn't suggest without having artists come and implement it and suggest it for him. It's hilarious. They're so helpful. And so really, these are mutually beneficial partnerships. I mean, artists are not perfect. They are very resourceful. They're able to cut to the meat of an issue. But just like cities could benefit from them being in the driver's seat for their creative abilities, they could benefit from having access and institutional support and the knowledge that comes with the backing of a civic leadership environment. And I think that once that happens, I wouldn't want you to bureaucratize artists or make them all city officials. We'd be having trash collected at 10 p.m. But there are really innovative ways that we could start these partnerships. We've seen a lot of this in terms of redevelopment with kind of event-based stuff, where really artists in the civic environment are collaborating. But there's other even more, I would say, innovative ways this is happening. This is an example that's going on in upstate New York. It's called Breathing Lights. And so this is a Bloomberg-funded project where they've established 3 different communities in Albany, Synecdoche, and Troy, and they have spotlit these blighted communities that are abandoned. And they've literally brought in light artists to breathe life and warmth into these buildings. And so over the course of a few months, the community will really become visible and more connected to what's happening. And as one window goes out over time, it's replaced with civic investment and activity. So it's a really innovative way of saying, here's the spotlight, places that we care about, and here's what we can do. Another really cool partnership is one that's in South Carolina, in a place called Spartanburg. This is a project called Seeking Out Spartanburg in a New Light. And this is a place where, like many places, there is a lot of tension between the communities and the people that police them. And so this is a partnership between the mayor, the police department, artists, and community groups where it really builds upon National Night Out, which is a national holiday around civic engagement and safety. And it starts to spotlight 10 neighborhoods that really are having issues with this type of dynamic and spotlighting them, creating safe spaces, and also zones for dialogue. What's going to be really interesting about cities that adopt this viewpoint, where artists have a seat at the table, is that you're going to see the cities are defined by their really innovative solutions instead of their problems. And then you're going to have best practice cities that are actually going to be able to communicate with one another, and artists are already facilitating that. This is an awesome project called PORTAL. It's by an artist collective called Shared Studio, and they literally put a shipping container and then outfit it with this state-of-the-art AV and video technology. So you step inside and you're talking to someone across the world from you. So this has become a platform that is spread far across the world, and really it's a way for not only leaders to engage with one another, but for people on the ground to actually talk to one another about what strategies are working, how can we share, how can we communicate. This is what happens when you really put artists in the driver's seat and think about what solutions could be possible. I think that as we approach this 21st century model where there's so many people who lack access, where there's so much need for empowerment and engagement, it's really time to put artists at the table as drivers of civic innovation. Thank you.